In this session, we are going to experiment with shape and lines to create our own abstract portrait. So I'm going to stick in our image, and this will be familiar to you because it's the same image we use in the centre of our mood boards. So I'm just going to stick that centrally. Okay, so we are going to identify negative space, consider the links between the middle, the foreground and the background, and finally we're going to use our scissors accurately to create the clear shapes and lines from our photographs. So in preparation for this session, everyone will need a printed copy of their face, and you might want to print at least a couple, maybe in different colours, so we can experiment. So what is negative space within art? I'm going to write that. So if we look at the main subject image here, negative space is all the space around and between the subject. So our main focal point is the portrait in this image, and all the space in between, so where I'm pointing with my pencil, like here, 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 and part of the background, is all of the negative space. Almost like the empty space in our artwork. But why is negative space important? Well, first of all, it helps us identify the focal point. It brings your eye and attention to the main subject, and it also emphasises the positive space. So the positive space is the purpose and why we are looking at the image, and the negative space is there to enhance that. So I'm just going to now annotate my image, and this will help us when we move on to exploring and creating our own abstract portrait. So on my page I have used a post-it note. You can use a colour pencil or a felt tip, and I have identified all the negative space within Dali's portrait, and I've done a bit of a key at the bottom, so whatever you choose, just to remind me that I've labelled all the negative space within the image, and I have written down some annotation to remind me of what negative space is and why it is important within art. So for the next part of the session, you should have a selection of portraits that you have printed or your teacher has printed. If you haven't got any, then I suggest you do this before you move on to this stage. So I've printed out my lovely face in yellow colour, a blue colour, green, bright red. It can be black and white, it can be original, and there can be different facial expressions. So you should all have your own face printed numerous times. Right, let's go back to our main subject picture. This is going to form part of the middle ground in our art outcomes. So last week when we were creating our backgrounds, let me just bring up my background. There we go. So last week when we were creating our backgrounds, we were aware of this middle section here. So remember, this is the foreground where the viewer is standing. The background is behind the trees, and I've got this city town scene in my middle ground. So at this stage, all our backgrounds should be nice and dry. We are focusing on that middle ground. And if we go back to Dali's example, really concentrate on the face, the portrait. The face has been distorted. You can identify different areas. We know this is an eye. Because we recognise a face, we know that this area forms part of the eye socket. But it's not a realistic eye. So it's been replaced by different objects or part of the background scene. Why do we think Dali has done this? So the style of art we're looking at is Surrealism, and if you go back to your mood boards, remember Surrealism is beyond reality and anything is possible. So have a look at this portrait again. Look at the person's neck. It's morphed into the background because the background is a beach scene where we've got the sky, the sea, and part of the sand from the coast. And the neck or the jawline is morphed into the scene. So it's like an optical illusion where the portrait is almost supposed to be there. To help illustrate this better, I've got some extra photos where you can see the portrait is morphed into the landscape. Here you've got the background where you've got this waterfall and the sea, and it is morphed into the person's face here. There's another one where it's like a photo on top of another photo, and the arches where the bridges are look like the eyes, or we are made to believe they are the eyes in the artwork. Again, we've got a view out of the window, and the window frame forms part of the profile of the face. And have a look at this one. This is quite relevant to what we are going to do. We are going to use our backgrounds to decide where we are going to cut our faces, because this is going to be layered on top of our backgrounds. We need to think about the shapes we cut from the face, how it can be morphed into our different landscapes, and what areas are we going to cut to draw more attention to our portraits. What parts would we like more visible? Here we've got the person's eye, the mouth and the nose. And we are eventually going to pick objects from our lockdown's experience, our favourite parts, and we are going to morph them into different features. When we are cutting out our faces, we are not going to be including our whole face. But I'm going to go through my portraits just to show you exactly what I mean. Got my background, I'm going to put to the side, and the reason why I've got my face in all these different colours is because they're going to help blend into my scene. So having the greens of the tree and the grass here and the pinks are going to help. So I have cut out the original picture of my face without any photo filters, and looking at where I'm going to place it, I've decided on having it against this tree here. Because I've got mousy brown hair, where my hair sits in front of my ear, it gives the illusion of the trunk of the tree continuing. And I've used inspiration from Dali's artwork, and I have cut out my eye. So this is showing my negative space, and the background layer is coming through. So at this stage we're not sticking anything, we are experimenting and exploring where certain features of our face can fit. So use all of your photos and really think about what areas you want to shine through as part of your personality. Please remember, this is an abstract surrealist portrait. We are not trying to make it realistic. It has to resemble us, and it will do because of our photos. But have some fun with it. There's no right, there's no wrong, and it's really about portraying that mood. So I'm going to use my yellow filter to put part of my chin and my jawline. So I'm just cutting this out. And I've used the yellow filter and my original filter, which I split into two. So I remember I had two photos of that. And looking at the middle ground, I'm just going to put in my jawline. So I've got two different examples here. And the purpose of this, I'm trying to create the impression of a lot more layers of trees in the middle ground and the foreground, as well as linking the bottom of my face to part of my portrait. And I am moving it around to see where it fits in my composition. I'm continuing experimenting, and I've started to cut out carefully the shapes around my face, and I'm exploring and seeing visually what I like on my page. And I'm not going to use every single feature, so remember, we're not going to have both eyes, nose, mouth, hair, etc. We are just going to pick out the shapes that we like, because we are going to fill in the gaps with different objects at a later stage. So I have got really curly hair, and using the green filter, I thought it'd be quite nice to add in part of my curly hair, and it resembles some of the texture of the trees in the background as well. Remember, you can move it all around. If you've got really long hair, will the hair come off the page, perhaps? Got lots to think about, and again, this negative space is important at framing our face. Just to remember, we are not sticking anything, and it doesn't matter if we're cutting out more than what we are going to use, because there's only one way to try it. So here I've got lots and lots of different eyes. So I was going to put my eye in green here, but I think that I'm going to use an object instead. So I'm going to remove that, and again, my nose I could put in this area here, but I think that will be as much detail as I would like using my photos. So experiment, have fun, and it might be handy for you to have a little wallet or a punch pocket to put the remainder of your face features in. Make sure they're labelled of yours. And by the end of the session, we should be happy with the version of our portraits that we wish to layer on top of our background, ready for the next step. And if you could take a picture of that and label with your name, so then we can stick them next time.